The Toronto Raptors are allegedly trading Gary Trent Jr. Now, I have been advocating that if there was anybody to be traded, because the two guys most likely to be traded were allegedly Gary Trent Jr. and our man Fred VanVleet. I'm a big proponent on if you had to decide between a young guy and a guy who's closer to being on the wrong side of 30, I would choose the young guy, Gary Trent, who's a former five-star recruit, 23 years old, than Fred VanVleet, who also just signed with Clutch Sports. And I know Fred VanVleet's 28, but he's closer to being in his 30s than Gary Trent. I just think that's, the deal that makes most sense. I obviously am aware that Gary Trent would net you more in return in terms of asset than Fred VanVleet arguably will. I want to hear your thoughts down below, but let me read you the report. This is coming from Jake Fischer and Marc Stein, who Marc Stein appeared on Jake Fischer's podcast, and this is what has been told, that they reported that they've been told that Gary Trent is at least a like on the Lakers' radar, and that they don't know if the Lakers have actually called them. And we made a video the other day that there's been a deal that was rumored that would send Pirtle to the Raptors, 2 first-round picks to the Spurs with Russell Westbrook, and the Lakers get Gary Trent, Doug McDermott, and Josh Richardson. And Marc Stein then said he would classify Gary Trent as the most likely Raptor to be moved by the deadline, but he doesn't know if the Raptors have the appetite to make the trade that is hoped for by rival teams. And again, I also am in the assumption that they could just ride this out. That's also a potential. So my thought process right now is, what do you do right here with Gary Trent, who I personally believe is someone that should be retained? And you don't trade Gary Trent for Pirtle. That's the whole thing I have with that deal that we talked about. I mentioned and I made a video in the past for. It's just hard to picture a deal where, Gary, it's hard for me. It's hard for me to imagine a deal that is because you either want picks back or you want a guy who's going to at least impact your roster right now. And my assumption here is that I don't think there's a trade out there unless the Orlando Magic. That's why I think the Fred VanVleet makes more sense, because if you traded Fred VanVleet, the Orlando Magic and Phoenix Suns are interested. Phoenix Suns, you'd assume if you traded Fred VanVleet, it'd be around Chris Paul, unless they were trying to trade you other players, which would be, they would have to trade you like Landry Shamet, Dario Saric, and Jay Crowder, and I doubt that's what the Raptors want. But at least in Orlando, if you traded Fred VanVleet or Gary Trent to Orlando, you can get yourself Gary Harris, who's on it, another year. You can get yourself Mo Bamba. Gary Harris and Mo Bamba, if you traded Gary Trent or Fred VanVleet for that, that's an upgrade right there. You get a 3-and-D big, and you also get a 3-and-D wing, which is something that I would assume that they would want. And for me, I definitely think it's interesting to see how this all plays out, but what are your opinion on this that is in their best interest? Because again, let's just look at the salaries that they could potentially match it with, which it's not like we're going to sit here and be like, oh, Gary Trent Jr. is going to be a guy that you can easily go out and find matching contracts. He's making 17.5. Okay. Jonathan Isaac. Would you trade Gary Trent for Jonathan Isaac? Jonathan Isaac, he's a guy that now, for the season, he's played in 3 games, 9 minutes a night, 44% from 3. He's taken, so far, 9 3-pointers. He's made 4 of them. Okay? He's taken 18 field goals. He's made 8 of them. 44% field shooter, 44% from 3, 3 rebounds, 1 assist. And we don't even know if they would want to trade Jonathan Isaac to Orlando. And then you got, who else? Colin Sexton. Would you want to trade for that? That, supposedly he's available. Then Duncan Robinson. I don't know if, and then the rest is like Mitchell Robb, Marcus Smart, Derek White, Norman Powell, all guys unavailable. Same thing with Lauri Markkanen. Davis Bertans there, like Josip Nurkic and Josh Hart are open. Like it's just there's no trade in my mind that just makes a ton of sense for this squad. So that's where it just becomes quite difficult for me to imagine someone. Let me hear your thoughts.